when it feels like no one really knows your heart. Tonight's story began in a small village near Savati. At dusk, a man named Abia was standing alone by the village well. For many years he had been the one who listened to everyone's worries. People came to him when their hearts were heavy, and he always stayed to the end. But when night grew quiet, he could not think of anyone who would hear his own heart. "I am fine, it is nothing," he told himself again and again. The more he pretended to be okay, the heavier his chest became. He began to feel that only his heart had no place in the whole village. One evening he walked to the forest where the Buddha was staying. The Buddha looked around and gently called to him, "Friend, what kind of wind is blowing in your heart these days?" With a trembling voice Abia said, "People share their hearts with me, but I do not know how to share mine with anyone." The Buddha pointed to a small lamp by the path. "When people enter this yard they see faces and trees, not this little light, but when they walk home in the dark, it is this lamp that shows their feet. For a long time you have lived like that lamp, shining on others. Around every lamp there is also a ring of shadow, and your own heart stood there. Feeling that no one knows your heart is not weakness. It is the wound of those who have only listened and never been heard. Now, as you listen to others, begin also to listen to yourself. When the rest of life feels like an empty winter storehouse #shorts. Tonight's story began in a small village near Savati. At dusk a man named Sanaka was standing alone in his yard. In his younger days he had traded grain and filled his storehouse to feed his family. When the storehouse was full his heart felt strong. But after years of poor harvests the grain slowly disappeared. His body was no longer as strong as before. Each night he opened the storehouse door and stared at the emptying sacks. He thought, "If what I have saved is shrinking and my strength to earn more is fading, how will I support the rest of my life?" Carrying this fear, Sanaka walked along a forest path to the place where the Buddha was staying. The Buddha looked at him gently and asked what had brought him there. With a lowered head Sanaka said, "My storehouse is growing empty and I am growing old. The days ahead feel like a cold winter storehouse." The Buddha pointed to an old sack of grain nearby. When this sack was full, he said, the grain became food and life for many people. The sack is emptying, but the value of the grain has not disappeared. It has simply been used. Your past strength and wealth have also been used in many days of your life. Then the Buddha picked up a small handful of seeds. When the sack is full, we easily spill a handful of seeds. When the bottom is near, we look more carefully at each one. Fewer seeds do not mean weaker seeds. It only means we must choose more wisely where to plant them. Your remaining time, strength, and resources are like these seeds. You may not spread them widely as before, but now you can plant them in the places your heart truly wishes. Growing older does not mean your whole life must become winter. As Sanaka listened, he felt a different kind of breath begin to move in his chest. Fear did not vanish, but the thought that his remaining days could be chosen and planted like seeds quietly arose. Tonight's story will now be set down gently in one corner of the heart. If fear of old age and money is rising in you, you do not need to throw that fear away. For tonight it may be enough to ask where you wish to plant your remaining time and strength, and to softly hold the small seeds that are still in your hands. When you start to hate yourself. Tonight's story began at a small hermitage near Rajagaya. At dusk a young monk named Mahananada was sitting alone by a well. He had once worked in the marketplace and often hurt people with his harsh words. Even after becoming a monk, his heart did not become calm. Whenever he remembered a mistake, he repeated to himself, "I am a worthless person. I can never change." As he sat there, the Buddha walked quietly along the forest path and came to his side. The Buddha sat down next to him and asked gently, "Mahananada, what kind of words are moving through your heart right now?" With a trembling voice, Mahananada confessed, "I am ashamed of my past, so I attack myself every day in my thoughts." The Buddha pointed to the water in the well. "What do you see in the water now?" "I see my own face reflected." "Is your face twisted because the well itself is dirty?" "No, blessed one, it only looks that way because the surface is shaking." The Buddha said softly, "Just so, the well only reflects and does not make you dirty. In the same way your mind only shows your actions and thoughts. Your mind itself is not filth. Shame can be a lamp that helps you remember your mistakes. But if you use that lamp to burn yourself, it is only your heart that turns to ashes. From today, instead of saying I am worthless, use your shame to watch your steps, so you do not stand in the same place again. As Mahananada listened, he felt a small space open in his chest. The painful memories were still there, but he saw that he did not have to be the same as his mistakes. Between the voices that hated himself, a tiny wish to walk again in a better way quietly began to rise. Tonight's story will now be set down gently, in one corner of the heart. If harsh words toward yourself and feelings of shame are living in your mind, you do not have to believe all of them as the whole truth. For tonight it may be enough to notice the small breath in you that still wants to begin again, and to offer yourself one gentle sentence instead of another wound. When you feel you were not a good parent. Tonight's story began in a small village in the kingdom of Magadha. At dusk a man named Sagara was standing alone in his yard. In his younger days he had worked from early morning until late at night to support his children. Only after they had all left home did a cool emptiness begin to spread in his heart. He found himself asking, was I truly a good father? He remembered the nights when he was too tired to listen to their stories. He remembered the sharp words he had thrown out in haste. He was afraid those words had stayed in his children's hearts. That night Sagara went to the forest hermitage, where the Buddha was staying. The Buddha welcomed him under the shade of a tree, and offered him a seat. With a trembling voice Sagara spoke, Blessed One, I feel I was not enough as a parent. Only now, when my children are far away, do I see it clearly, and my heart is full of regret. The Buddha pointed to a clay water jar at the edge of the yard. Sagara, do you see that jar? The water is only half full and mixed with dust. But is it completely useless? Sagara answered quietly, No, it can still water the field and settle the dust. The Buddha said softly, A parent's love is like that. Even if it was clumsy and mixed with harsh words. The days you fed and protected your children do not disappear. The guilt you feel now does not mean there was no love. It means your heart has learned to see more deeply. From now on your task is not to stab yourself with the thought, I was a bad parent. It is to turn toward your children in your heart and say gently, Are you well? You have worked hard. Thank you. If you too feel you were not enough as a parent, for tonight it may be enough to send one warm sentence toward the child in your heart, and to see that there is still a quiet stream of love flowing within you, on a road that cannot return. Today's story began in a small village in the kingdom of Magadha. At sunset a man named Nandiya was walking along a dirt road with his head lowered. In his younger days he had lived under one roof with his younger brother and their parents. But when it was time to divide the family property, an argument grew between the brothers. In anger Nandiya spoke harsh words he could not take back. If someone must leave this house, then you should be the one to go. Let us no longer live under the same roof. After those words his brother packed his things and left for another village. Years later news came that his brother had fallen ill and passed away. From that day on Nandiya felt as if his heart stood on a road that could never return. One evening he could no longer bear the weight of his regret alone. He walked along a forest path to the place where the Buddha was staying. The Buddha was sitting beneath a tree, and quietly offered him a seat at his side. With a trembling voice Nandiya told the story of his brother, and lowered his head. The Buddha pointed toward the narrow path leading out of the hermitage. Even if you wish to walk back along the morning road, the sunlight and the wind have already changed its traces. Because you cannot return to the past, it does not mean there is no path left to walk. You cannot change the words you threw at your brother. But who you will be from this moment on is not yet fixed. Then the Buddha showed him a small oil lamp in the yard. Yesterday's flame will not return, yet in this same place you can light a new flame today. One who remembers their mistake with a sincere and painful heart can become a lamp so that others do not stand in the same darkness. As he listened, Nandiya felt a small passage open in his chest. He knew his words would no longer reach his brother. But he sensed that from now on, he could offer different words to the people who still stood beside him. Today's story will now be set down quietly in one corner of the heart. If an unchangeable mistake comes to mind in your own life, for tonight it may be enough to soften just one word. You speak to the person before you. May those small words and breaths slowly become a gentle light along your path, crossing emptiness with an empty bowl. Today's story began on a quiet night in the kingdom of Magadha. Sobhana was a lay follower who had spent his life in trade, gaining house, land, and a respected name. People would say, that man has truly achieved great things. But one day, as he was looking down into his cup, he suddenly asked himself, for what have I come all this way? My storehouses are full, so why is my heart this empty? That question quietly repeated itself during the day, and during the night. At last, holding the wish to ask the Buddha, he went to a small forest hermitage along the path. The Buddha looked at him sitting beneath a tree and gently asked, on this night, what kind of light is shining in your heart? Sobhana confessed in a trembling voice, I do not know what I have been living for. I have achieved many things, yet my heart feels like an empty bowl. The Buddha lifted a small bowl that was beside him. Sobhana, do you see this bowl? There is a little water in it, but does it look full to you? Sobhana shook his head. The Buddha spoke softly. The deeper the bottom of a bowl is, the harder it is to feel that it is full. Your heart is like this as well. Emptiness is not proof of failure, but it can be a sign that it is time to pour in a different kind of water. Now, instead of filling it with name and gain, try filling it with the work of easing one person's suffering. That night Sobhana returned home, lit a single lamp, and sat quietly. He recalled the moment in the day when his heart had felt the most empty, and in that place he brought someone to mind and imagined one small act of kindness. He felt a very faint but warm glow rise up from the once empty corner of his chest. Today's story will now be set down quietly in one corner of the heart. If a hollow question of what you have been living for arises in your own heart, please know that you do not need to hurry to push that question away, as if it were wrong. For today, may you simply look at that empty place and slowly fill it with a gentle breath and one small act of kindness. The inner home found on the road. Whenever anxiety rose up on the road, Sumana thought only of a house somewhere outside himself. In the middle of this wandering life called pilgrimage, he had not yet found an inner place where he could truly rest. After a while of quiet, Sumana carefully asked, Blessed One, when I stand on the road, I feel like a tree whose roots have been pulled up. I am afraid of a life that cannot stay long in any one place. With a heart like this, can I really continue the path of practice on the road? The Buddha looked into his eyes and spoke gently. Sumana, the deeper a tree's roots are, the more it will sway in the wind. What matters is not where you are standing, but whether you are aware of your breathing. In the very place where you stand, even if you remain on the road, if you can make this breath your home, then you have already found a place to stay. Sumana repeated these words to himself, as if carving them into his heart. It sounded to him like this. Do not struggle to find the end of the road far away, but learn to feel the ground beneath your feet as a kind of home. That day, as the sun was sinking, the Buddha and the disciples reached a small village. The villagers offered them an empty room beside a cowshed for the night. Sumana spread his bedding on the rough earthen floor and sat down quietly. It was a strange, unfamiliar room, but he did not stare at the ceiling for long. Instead, he placed his hands softly on his chest and recalled the steps he had walked that day along the road. The trees and wind in the fields, the air of dawn and the light of midday, and the conversation he had shared with the Buddha. He felt that wherever he might be, if he could look gently at this breathing, that place could become a small home where he stayed for a while. With his eyes closed, he whispered very quietly inside, right here, in this very breath, is the home of my heart. Night had already deepened, but inside Sumana's chest, it was as if a very small lamp had just been lit. The road still stretched on far into the distance, but he no longer felt like a complete wanderer. He had found a quiet place within, where he could return, no matter where his feet were standing. Tonight's story we now quietly set down in a corner of the heart. If your own life has ever felt like you were endlessly wandering on the road, you might let the place where this breath rests become a small home for a while. Wherever your feet are standing now, may you gently build a home of the heart along the path of your breathing. And may you meet a soft and restful peace. The breath left in the darkest night, on a night so dark that almost no stars could be seen. A young man named Nira sat quietly on a rock by a forest road outside a small village. Even getting through a single day felt unbearably hard, and even among people, his heart felt completely alone. Then, along the forest path, a small lamp drew near. The Buddha, walking on his wandering path, came to Nira and sat beside him on the rock. After a long shared silence, a gentle question came. On this night, how far has your heart fallen? Nira answered in a low voice. It is so hard just to endure one day. I feel like a person who is not needed anywhere. The Buddha picked up a small pebble at his feet and placed it on his palm. Look at this stone, he said. It has been struck by rain and wind and countless footsteps on its way to this place. Then he softly placed the pebble into Nira's open hand. As long as you hold this stone, it has one place in the whole world that belongs only to it. In the same way, in someone's heart, you too have such a place. The Buddha rested a hand on his chest. Do not try to endure your whole life at once. Tonight, guard only one breath, from beginning to end. So Nira held the pebble tight and quietly followed, one in breath and one out breath. Tonight's story we now quietly set down in a corner of the heart. If, right now, your own heart is also in a night where you cannot see ahead, you might softly say to yourself, for now, let me just stay. With this one breath, the evening a father loosened his burden. Tonight's story begins in the fields at sunset. At the edge of a village, beneath a small tree, a middle-aged father sat quietly alone. His name was Dasaka. Lately, the work at the market had been shrinking, and his body no longer moved the way it used to. Whenever he thought of his parents' medicine and his children's future, his chest tightened with worry. Now the money keeps decreasing, he thought. But the people leaning on me stay the same. He felt as if he were slowly becoming a useless person. At that moment, the Buddha and his disciples were passing by the village. On their arms round, the Buddha saw Dasaka sitting beneath the tree, and gently walked over to sit beside him. After a short silence, a soft question came across the evening air. On this evening, which burden weighs heaviest on your heart? Dasaka let out a long sigh. I work, but I no longer earn as I once did. My parents grow older and weaker. My children are not yet able to stand on their own. If I collapse, it feels as though everyone will fall with me. The Buddha pointed toward a well at the edge of the fields. A well that had filled the village's jars for many long years. From the outside, the Buddha said, it seems the well is the one helping the people. But first, it is the rain from the sky and the water beneath the earth that quietly fill the well. Then the Buddha drew a small dot in the earth, and around it he slowly traced a circle. Think of this dot as the money in your hand, and think of this circle as the web of relationships and love you have protected until now. The money that comes into your hand may decrease, but the circle of heart you have shared does not disappear so easily. Dasaka's shoulders sank a little with relief. The mind that had only tried to measure itself in numbers began to quietly catch its breath. The Buddha's gaze turned toward the evening sky. When the sun begins to sink, its light grows weaker, but its colors become deeper. In your youth, you were like the midday sun, shining brightly over your household. Now is the time not to guard them only with your body, but to shine on them with the wisdom you have slowly gathered in your heart. From today on, the Buddha continued, do not see yourself as a discarded pillar. The longer a pillar has stood, the more people have rested in its shade. Allow yourself, too, to rest for a while in that very shade you have given to others. Tonight's story we now quietly set down in a corner of the heart. If you, too, have been looking down on yourself because you no longer earn as much as before, you might gently recall the wide circle of care you have kept alive until now. At least for today, may you also allow a small patch of shade and rest for your own tired shoulders. The bridge between two generations. The story began in a small village of Magadha at evening, when the sky was turning soft and dark. In the yard of one quiet house, a man named Upalika stood alone. His children had already left home to live their own lives. Deep inside the house, his aging mother lay weak in bed. Upalika moved between them both, feeling as if he was never enough for either side. That day, the Buddha passed by the village on his wandering, and saw Upalika in the yard. The Buddha sat down beside him and listened to his worries in silence. Then he pointed to a tree. He said that when the birds leave the nest, the tree cannot hold them. Yet it still keeps its roots in the earth and quietly faces the sky. Later, the Buddha drew a line in the earth and laid a twig across it like a bridge. He told Upalika, "You are not trapped between two sides. You are the bridge that connects parent and child." That night, sitting by his mother's side, Upalika held this image in his heart and allowed his own breath, at last, a small place to rest. The place of the silent bell. Today's story began in a small village near Savatthi. Anurodra, a lay follower who kept the market accounts, had long stood at the center of the village. When the calculations became difficult, people used to say, "Let us ask Anurodra first about today's matters." But when a new way of counting from distant cities arrived, the younger people began to take his place. "Now we will take care of it. Now you should rest comfortably, elder." The place left behind after those praise, like words, was quieter than he had expected. Anurodra murmured to himself, "Am I now someone this village can do without?" Whenever that thought arose, it felt as if the inside of his chest grew a little colder. Just then the Buddha was greeting people by the forest edge and looked toward him. Anurodra hesitated, unsure if he was allowed to be there. "Good man, what kind of sound has been echoing in your heart these days?" Anurodra confessed that he felt like a bell. No one came to ring anymore. The Buddha pointed toward the bell tower at the edge of the village and spoke. "A bell is not a bell only when it is ringing. Even on days when no one strikes it, it quietly keeps its place between sky and earth. In your younger days you lived as a bell that rang loudly for many. Now you can be a bell that offers a quiet place when a lonely person comes near. Within the feeling that you are no longer useful, a space is also growing where you can gently hold someone. For this one moment today, it is enough to say that you too can be such a silent bell. You may softly whisper these words to yourself, and at least in this moment, may you also be able to lean quietly against your own heart." The burning coal in the hand. The story began in a quiet monastery one late afternoon. In a small room, a young monk named Anura sat with his fists tightly clenched. A few days earlier, his fellow monk, Naraka, had joked about Anura's mistake in front of others. Their laughter kept echoing in his chest. Whenever Anura heard Naraka's voice, his heart heated up like fire. He kept thinking, "If it were not for him, I would not feel this much hatred." While he sat there, the Buddha gently opened the door and stepped inside. Seeing Anura's face, the Buddha invited him to walk out to the yard where the firewood was kept. There were still some pieces of charcoal glowing with a dull red light. The Buddha picked one up with metal tongs. Then he asked, "If you wanted to throw this burning coal at the one you hate, what would you have to do first?" Anura answered quietly, "I would have to pick it up in my own hand." The Buddha's voice softened. "Then whose hand would burn first?" Anura looked down at his own palms. He realized the hatred he was gripping had already been burning his own heart. The Buddha then filled a small bowl with clear water and dropped in a single drop of black ink. The water turned cloudy at once. "This is your mind," he said, "and this one drop is your hatred." He slowly poured more clean water into the bowl. The darkness thinned out and became softer. "Hatred does not always disappear at once," the Buddha said, "but you can widen the heart that holds it. When you see the fear and hurt behind your anger, the hatred slowly loses its strength." That night Anura sat alone with a small lamp beside him. He brought Naraka to mind and then the wounded part of himself that only wanted to be seen and not mocked. Inside he whispered, "Angry heart, you rose up to protect me. Now let us stop burning me and gently calm down." Tonight's story will now rest quietly in a corner of your heart. If there is someone you still burn with anger toward, you may also look gently at the hurt behind that flame. Soften your breathing and allow yourself a small, peaceful rest. The saddest tears in the world. Tonight's story began in a small monastery on a rainy evening. A soft rain was falling and a young monk named Viru stood in the yard. He was quietly watching the rain collect in a large water jar. Lately many people had come to the monastery in tears. Some had lost family. Some had lost everything they owned. Some were crushed by their own mistakes. Viru looked at them and thought, whose tears are the deepest? Which sorrow is the most real? As he was thinking this, the Buddha walked out into the rainy yard. He came to stand beside Viru and looked at the water jar with him. After a while the Buddha asked gently, Viru, what thoughts are filling your heart tonight? Viru answered softly, many people come here crying. I find myself comparing their pain and judging their tears. The more I do this, the drier my own heart feels. The Buddha placed several small bowls beside the jar. He dipped a finger in the rainwater and let one drop fall into the first bowl. This drop is a mother who lost her child, he said. He dropped water into the next bowls. This one is a person who feels they lost their whole life. This one is someone who woke up too late to the harm they caused. Then the Buddha set one last bowl down in front of Viru. Into this bowl he dropped no water at all. Viru looked at the empty bowl and frowned. The Buddha spoke quietly. You wonder what is the saddest tear in the world. I say it is the tear that never falls. The pain that is locked inside and never shown to anyone. The hurt that is called small and unimportant, even by the one who feels it. That silent tear meets no comfort and no understanding. That is why it is the saddest of all. Viru's chest ached as he listened. He suddenly remembered nights from his childhood. Nights when he bit his lips and buried his face in his blanket, so no one would hear him cry. Warm tears slowly rose to his eyes. Inside he whispered to himself, it is all right. I am allowed to cry now. He did not stop the tears as they finally flowed. They fell like soft rain on long dry ground in his heart. Tonight's story will now rest quietly in a corner of your heart. If there is a tear inside you that has never been allowed to fall, you do not need to hide it from yourself now. As you notice your gentle breathing, may you let your own heart soften. And may you offer yourself a small, peaceful rest. A love that never runs out. The story began one evening in a quiet monastery. As the sun was sinking behind the hills, a young monk named Sagara was sitting alone on the stone steps beside the hall. A letter from home had arrived a few days earlier. In it his younger brother wrote that their mother was often ill in bed. Sagara also remembered the harsh words he had thrown at his father. The day he left home, he thought quietly, why did I speak so coldly? I do not think I was a good son. While he sat there, the Buddha walked down toward him. With the evening light at his back, the Buddha sat beside him in silence for a while. Then he asked gently, Sagara, what kind of wind is blowing in your heart tonight? Sagara took a slow breath and answered, when I read the letter my heart kept turning back to my parents. I left to follow this path, but now it feels like I have not been there for them. The Buddha listened and then said softly, come, let us look at a lamp together. He led Sagara to a small room where the temple lamps were prepared. The Buddha lit one oil lamp and a soft light filled the room. Then he lifted a second lamp and took the flame from the first. Now two lamps were shining side by side. The Buddha asked, has the light of the first lamp become less? Sagara looked carefully and shook his head. No, the two lights are shining together. The Buddha said, a parent's love is like this. The more they give to a child, the less it seems to remain for themselves, yet in truth the light only spreads. Then the Buddha poured a little clear water into a small bowl and dropped in a pinch of salt. He asked, what taste do you think this water has now? Sagara replied, it would be very salty. The Buddha pointed to a large jar of water nearby. Pour this bowl into that jar. Sagara did so, and the small bowl of salty water disappeared into the larger water. The Buddha spoke again. If you drink from the jar now, will the salt be strong? Sagara answered, almost not at all. The Buddha said quietly, the salt is still there, but the water has become wide. Your regret is like this salt. You cannot take it back. But you can widen your heart with care, prayer, and honest love. A wider heart does not burn itself with guilt, but can hold love for a long time. That night Sagara lit a small lamp in his room and sat quietly. He brought his parents to mind and whispered inside, Mother, Father, I am breathing here, and I wish you peace. Tonight's story will now rest quietly in a corner of your heart. If there is unspoken love or regret for your own family, you may let it rise like a small prayer instead of a wound. As you notice your gentle breathing, may you feel that even across distance, hearts can still reach for one another. And may you allow yourself a soft and peaceful rest, the heart that holds shame gently. The story begins in a quiet monastery at sunset. In the back courtyard, a monk named Sumana sits with his head lowered. Lately his heart has been full of shame and guilt. He keeps thinking, why did I say that? Why do I regret so much and still fail to change? Each memory burns hot for a moment and then turns into a cold, heavy stone in his chest. The Buddha walks into the courtyard with the evening light. At his back, he quietly sits beside Sumana. After a while he asks, Sumana, what kind of light does your heart have today? Sumana answers softly, my heart feels like a stained robe. On the outside I pretend I am fine, but inside there are marks that will not disappear. The Buddha points to the stone slab where the monks dry their laundry. These robes were all soaked in dirty water at first, he says. But when they are washed again and again in clear water and hung long in the sunlight, their smell fades and their color brightens. Sumana then watches as the Buddha drops a small stone into a jar of clean water. For a moment the water clouds and ripples. Then it slowly clears again. Even pure water turns cloudy. When a stone falls into it, the Buddha says, but the water does not hate itself. In time the dust settles and the water becomes clear again. Your heart is like this. Clouded is not the same as ruined. The Buddha's voice softens. Guilt at first is a lamp that lets you see your mistake. But if you grip it too long it becomes a burning coal that hurts you. Now your work is not to burn yourself, but to keep only the light you learned from what you did. Sumana places his hand on his chest and whispers inside, ashamed heart, thank you for coming this far with me today. As he says this, the stone in his chest feels just a little lighter. Tonight's story will now rest quietly in a corner of your heart. If shame or guilt is living inside you, too, you do not have to fight it right now. You may simply hold it gently for a moment. Soften your breath and allow yourself a small, peaceful rest. The heart that sits beside loneliness. Today's story began in a small mountain monastery, wrapped in morning mist. Before the birds began to sing, one monk was already awake and sitting alone in the yard. His name was Mahananda. Lately he often felt lonely in a way he could not explain. Even when he sat among the other monks, one part of his heart felt empty and far away. He thought quietly, why do I feel alone even when I am with people? Just then the Buddha walked into the yard. With the first light of dawn at his back, he sat down beside Mahananda in silence. After a while he asked gently, Mahananda, how is the sky of your heart today? Mahananda answered in a low voice, it feels like an empty sky with no clouds. Like standing alone in a wide field. The Buddha looked up at the dim sky. It seems empty to your eyes, he said, but unseen winds are moving and sleeping birds are breathing in their nests. Even now many forms of life are quietly leaning on one another. Then he pointed to an old tree at the edge of the yard. On the surface you only see the trunk and branches, he said. But under the ground its roots are touching other roots, and sharing the same earth and water. You are not a broken branch. You are one tree in this forest. The Buddha picked up a small stone and dropped it into a still puddle. Circles of ripples spread gently across the water. Your loneliness is like this, he said. If you hold it all by yourself the circle grows wider. But the hearts that think of you also feel small waves. Mahananda watched the water grow calm again. He asked softly, when this heavy feeling returns, what should I do? The Buddha touched his own chest. Do not try to drive the feeling away first, he said. Sit it beside you. Mahananda placed his hands over his heart and whispered, lonely heart, thank you for coming this far with me today. As he said it, the stone on his chest felt just a little lighter. Tonight's story will now rest quietly in a corner of your heart. If a quiet loneliness lives inside you, too, you may let it sit beside you instead of pushing it away. And as you notice your breathing, remember that like a tree in a forest, you are standing on the same earth as many others. And you may allow yourself a gentle, peaceful rest. A small lamp in the dark. Tonight's story began in a quiet monastery at night. Only a few small lamps were burning in the dark courtyard. A young monk named Nandiya was cleaning the lamps and filling them with oil. Lately he had felt very small inside. He thought his work was unimportant. I only sweep the yard and care for these lamps. He thought, other monks teach and help many people. What good am I doing? The Buddha walked into the courtyard and saw Nandiya with the old lamp. He asked gently, "What are you doing at this late hour?" Nandiya lowered his gaze. "I am only cleaning the lamps and adding oil. I do not know if this really matters." The Buddha lifted one worn lamp. "Add a little oil and light this one," he said softly. Nandiya poured the oil and lit the wick. A small flame rose and one corner of the yard grew brighter. The Buddha asked, "Is this light great or small?" Nandiya answered, "It is not great, but it is clearly brighter than before." The Buddha smiled. "One small lamp cannot chase away all darkness. But without this lamp this place would now be darker than it is." Nandiya felt something loosen in his chest. He remembered the little things he had done that day. Catching a monk who almost slipped. Sharing the weight of a heavy water jar. He had called them nothing. Now they felt like small lights along someone's path. The Buddha said, "Even a small lamp that stays in its place can light the way for others. Do not despise your own light just because it seems small to you." That night Nandiya sat quietly beside the lamps. He watched the small flames tremble softly and breathe with the night air. Inside he whispered, "I will take care of this little light. That is enough for tonight." Tonight's story slowly closes here. If a tiny spark from it has stayed with you, you may let it rest gently in your heart. Now you can follow your breathing and offer a silent thank you to the small lights that have guided you through the dark. The slowly ripening heart. The story began in a quiet mountain monastery at dusk. A young monk named Saripada felt his heart growing impatient. He meditated yet his mind wandered. He worked yet forgot his practice. He kept thinking, "Why am I not changing faster?" One evening he went to the Buddha and bowed. He confessed that he still felt angry, lazy and full of comparison. He feared he would never reach awakening. The Buddha did not answer at once. He simply invited Saripada to walk with him to the kitchen. On the fire a large pot of rice was slowly boiling. White grains rose and sank in the gentle bubbles. The Buddha asked, "Is this rice fully cooked now?" Saripada looked carefully and answered, "No, it still feels half raw." Then the Buddha asked, "If we make the fire very strong, will it cook faster?" Saripada paused. "At first it will boil hard. But the outside may burn while the inside stays raw." The Buddha's eyes softened. "Practice is like this rice. If you push too hard you scorch the surface and tire the mind. With steady fire and patient watching the whole heart slowly cooks through." That night Saripada sat quietly and imagined a small pot in his chest. He saw his own heart as rice slowly softening over a gentle flame. He realized he was already on the fire. He only needed to stay. Tonight's story slowly closes here. If one small sentence has stayed with you, you may let it rest gently inside. Now you can loosen the urge to hurry. Feel your breathing move at its own pace and allow yourself a slow and peaceful rest. Letting go like flowing water. In a quiet mountain temple lived the Buddha and a young monk named Ananda. For days Ananda's heart felt heavy with memories of past mistakes. One afternoon the Buddha led him to a small stream below the temple. Beside the clear water lay a single heavy rock. "The rock is heavy," the Buddha said. "Yet it does not hurt you, because you are not carrying it." On the surface of the stream a tiny twig floated by. The current slowly carried it out of sight. Ananda watched and thought, "If I do not grab it, it simply flows on." The Buddha spoke softly. "Water moves forward and does not return. When you truly learn from a mistake, it can guide your steps instead of weighing you down." That night Ananda sat in silence, remembering the rock, the twig, and the flowing water. With each gentle breath his chest felt a little lighter. Inside he whispered, "I will let what is flowing simply flow on." Tonight's story slowly closes here. If one quiet sentence has remained with you, let it rest softly inside. Now you may follow your breathing and allow yourself a peaceful rest. The Parable of the Snake. Today's story began with a young monk. He studied scriptures faster than anyone, and believed he understood them deeply. But strangely his heart became more and more uneasy. One day he sat among the disciples as the Buddha began teaching. He appeared respectful, but inside he quietly thought, I already know this teaching. At that moment the Buddha spoke gently. Imagine a man trying to catch a snake. Everyone looked toward him. The Buddha continued, to catch a snake safely one must firmly hold its head. If he grabs the tail, the snake will twist around and bite him. The young monk could not understand the meaning. The Buddha looked into his eyes and said, the scriptures are the same. If held correctly they become wisdom. If held incorrectly they become poison. The words pierced deeply into his heart. The Buddha continued speaking. Those who wish to know quickly, or know more than others, are like someone holding a snake by the tail. Impatience and pride hide the true meaning of the teachings. The monk's face slowly stiffened. He asked quietly, Lord Buddha, have I been holding the teachings in the wrong way? The Buddha answered softly, you have not held the teachings. The teachings have been holding you. Tears gathered in the young monk's eyes. The Buddha then said, learning is not about speed but attitude. Even one sentence understood correctly can change one's entire life. After that day he no longer read scriptures to impress others. He read slowly and reflected on each sentence within his own life. This is where today's story ends. Are you holding the snake by its head or by its tail? May the wisdom you hold today protect and guide your heart. Sariputta and Moggallana enlightenment. Today's story begins with two young seekers. Their names were Sariputta and Moggallana. They were wise and devoted but felt a quiet emptiness inside. One day Sariputta was walking through the village after alms round. In the distance he saw a monk walking slowly and calmly. Nothing about him was flashy, but his presence was peaceful like still water. Sariputta felt drawn to him for no clear reason. It felt as if the answer he had been searching for was walking toward him. He approached respectfully and asked, Venerable Sir, who is your teacher and what teaching do you follow? The monk was Venerable Asaji. He spoke softly, I am a disciple of the Buddha. The Buddha teaches that all things arise from conditions, and all things cease when those conditions end. This is the teaching of the Buddha. Those simple words struck Sariputta like lightning. Questions that had followed him for years suddenly aligned. Birth arises from conditions and death fades with conditions, and the self he clung to was also a flow of conditions. He took a deep breath as if a locked door had opened in his heart. Sariputta ran to find his friend. Moggallana, I have heard a single sentence that changed everything. All things arise from conditions and cease when conditions end. Moggallana heard the words and felt his chest tremble. He too had long searched for clarity. The teaching settled gently into his heart, like a light placed in darkness. The two decided together, let us go and meet the Buddha himself. Standing before the Buddha they offered deep bows. The Buddha looked at them with calm eyes and said, your minds have already seen the path. The truth of conditions is a lamp that dispels all confusion. It was not I who brought you here but your own longing for truth. From that day Sariputta became foremost in wisdom, and Moggallana foremost in spiritual power. But titles did not matter to them. What mattered was the quiet shift in their hearts. They realized something simple. A great teaching is not always needed. When the mind is ready, a single sentence can change an entire life. Today's story ends here. Perhaps one short sentence will one day illuminate a question in your own heart. Angulimala. People trembled at his name. Angulimala. He attacked travelers and cut off their fingers to make a necklace. The whole land lived in fear. One day the villagers begged the Buddha, Buddha, please stop him. The Buddha said, there is a path he has not seen. I will go to him. The Buddha walked toward the forest. Angulimala saw him and grabbed his sword. He shouted, stop right there or I will kill you. But the Buddha kept walking calmly. Angulimala ran with all his strength yet could not reach him. Out of breath he yelled, why won't you stop? I told you to stop. The Buddha said, I have already stopped. I stopped from harming and from hatred. The one who has not stopped is you. The words cut deeper than any sword. Angulimala suddenly saw the path behind him. Blood on the ground and fingers around his neck. His sword fell from his hand. He whispered, can someone like me stop? Can I change? The Buddha said, if you stop now, this moment becomes your first step on a new path. That day Angulimala laid down his weapon and followed the Buddha. Today's story ends here. Sometimes the bravest step is not to move forward but to finally stop. The bird in the palm. Today's story begins with two young disciples who wanted to test the Buddha's wisdom. They caught a small bird and hid it inside one of their hands. One whispered, "Let's ask the Buddha if this bird is alive or dead." The other smiled, "If he says it's alive, I will crush it. If he says it's dead, I will release it." They believed this question would trap the Buddha. Standing before him, the young man asked, "Buddha, is the bird in my hand alive or dead?" Silence spread around them. The Buddha did not look at the hand. He looked gently into the young man's eyes and said, "The bird's life or death is in your hands." The two disciples froze. The Buddha spoke again, "Life lives or dies depending on how you choose to hold it. And the responsibility for that choice is always yours." The young man slowly opened his hand. The little bird looked up at him with frightened eyes. He released it into the sky and the bird disappeared into the wind. Only then did he realize that his palm had been holding a life. The Buddha said, "Your words and actions and heart are born from the palm of your own hand. Depending on how you hold them, they can bring life or cause harm." Today's story ends here. May your hands choose life and kindness for someone today. Today's story begins with the grief of a young woman. Her name was Kisa Gotami. She had lost her only child, and her heart could not bear the pain. She walked through the village, holding her child in her arms. "Please, does anyone know a medicine that can bring my child back?" People turned away, and some only gave her sad eyes. One old man said, "Go to the Buddha." Kisa Gotami ran to the Buddha, with her child still in her arms. "Buddha, please save my child." The Buddha listened quietly, and then spoke, "Go and bring me a medicine that can save him." Her eyes lit up with hope. "What must I bring?" The Buddha answered in one line, "Bring a handful of mustard seeds from a house where no one has ever died." Kisa Gotami hurried through the village. She knocked on the first door. "We lost our mother," the family said. The next house said their father had passed away. Another house had lost a child. Another had lost a brother. She walked from home to home, door after door, but there was not a single house untouched by death. As the sun began to set, she sat quietly by the roadside. She held her child close and whispered through her tears, "There is no house without death." The next morning, she returned to the Buddha. "Buddha, I could not find a single house without loss." The Buddha spoke gently, "Now you see, death does not visit only one house, and life stays with no one forever." Her shoulders trembled softly, but not with the same despair. She now understood that her grief was shared by every family in the world. She took a slow breath. For the first time since her loss, in accepting her sorrow, a small peace entered her heart. Today's story ends here. May a small light also shine in your heart tonight. The parable of the poisoned arrow. Today's story begins with a man who came to the Buddha. His heart was filled with questions he could not answer. Where does life begin? What happens after death? Why does the world exist at all? The more he questioned, the more restless he became. Finally, he asked the Buddha, "Where did the world come from? What happens after we die? Where does the soul go?" The Buddha looked at him quietly. Then he spoke, "Imagine a man shot with a poisoned arrow." The man blinked, confused. The Buddha continued, "He refuses to pull it out until he knows who shot it, what wood the arrow was made from, and where the poison came from." The wind passed softly as the man whispered he would die waiting for the answers. The Buddha nodded. "Then tell me, what must be done first?" The man replied, "The arrow must be removed." The Buddha smiled gently. "Your questions are like the details on that arrow's shaft. Where the world came from, what lies beyond death, how the universe began. Before all of that, there is one thing to do. Remove the arrow of suffering already lodged in your heart." The man's breath settled slightly. Only then did he realize his own pain. The Buddha spoke again, "See the cause of your suffering. Recognize the poison in your mind. Learn the way to lessen it. When you walk that path, many of your questions will lose their weight or answer themselves." The man murmured, "I was holding on to the wood grain, not the wound." The Buddha's gaze was calm. "Yes, and while you study the grain, the poison sinks deeper. Remove the arrow first. Only then will your path begin to appear." That night, the man said to himself, "First, let me look at the arrow in my own heart." He did not gain every answer, but he gained something better. Freedom from needing all the answers before he could live. If this short story helps you notice a small arrow in your own heart today, then the story has already done its work. Bowl and moonlight. Tonight's story begins with a small bowl of water. A young monk had been troubled for days. Meditation didn't calm him. Walking didn't help either. His thoughts followed him like a shadow. One night, he went to the Buddha. My mind won't be still. The more I try, the louder it gets. The Buddha handed him a small bowl. Go to the well and fill this with water. The monk walked through the dark path to the well. Moonlight was trembling softly on the surface. He scooped the water, but spilled half on the way back. He hurried to fill it again, but the water only rippled more. This water is like my mind, he whispered. The Buddha lifted the bowl under the moonlight. Look at the water. Only when it is calm does it reflect the moon. Your mind is the same. Forcing calm only stirs it more. Move less, grasp less, and the mind settles on its own. A breeze passed and the water trembled slightly. Then the moon returned, clear and still. It's okay to shake, the monk said softly. It becomes calm again. The Buddha smiled. Yes, shaking is not wrong. Knowing the shaking, this is wisdom. That night, a small moon of stillness began to shine. Inside the monk's heart. Broom and dust. Today's story begins with a single broom. A young monk struggled every night. He wanted to be still, but his thoughts would not stop. The Buddha did not scold him. He simply handed him a broom. Sweep the floor. Give the dust time to settle. The monk rushed, and the dust rose even higher. The Buddha said, dust escapes when you hurry. So does the dust of the mind. The monk slowed his breath and swept gently. The dust quietly settled. Look at the wind, the Buddha said. It pushes nothing. It simply passes. Your thoughts must do the same. By morning, the temple was tidy, but not perfect. The Buddha asked, why didn't you clean everything? The monk smiled. I left a little for today's me and a handful for tomorrow's me. The Buddha nodded. Cleanliness is not a moment. It is a habit. When you sweep each day, your mind clears each day. That night, the monk realized. Sweeping was not a battle. It was a conversation with his mind. When cloudy water becomes clear. Tonight's story is a small teaching. The Buddha shared with a disciple who wished to calm his mind. Listen slowly, there is no hurry. A disciple came to the Buddha, troubled. Though he had done well that day. Even when I rest, I feel guilty. When I meditate, thoughts don't stop. Why won't my mind settle? The Buddha did not scold. He smiled gently. Bring a bowl of water from the well. The disciple returned with clear water. Sky and leaves trembled on its surface. The Buddha dropped a pinch of soil. The water turned cloudy. How would you make it clear? I could stir, blow on it. Or fetch more, the disciple said. The Buddha set the bowl on a flat stone. Leave it for a while. A breeze brushed the rim. Forest sounds grew light. After a time, the grains of soil sank. The upper water cleared first. The disciple watched. His shoulders eased. What did you add? Asked the Buddha. Nothing. Exactly. Stirring muddy water doesn't clear it. Leave it be, and your view returns. The mind is the same. When thoughts arise, neither force them away nor cling to them. One breath, then another. Simply let them be. The disciple still feared falling behind. The Buddha looked at light through the leaves. The stronger the wind, the more the lake is stirred. When the wind quiets, the surface reflects the sky. Rest is not quitting. It lets you go on. Even a running horse needs a pause for breath. For at least one moment each day. Set the bowl down. In that time, breath returns. Thoughts clear, strength comes back. Then you can see what to do first. And what to set aside. Tonight, do not stir today's muddy water. Say quietly, now is the time to settle. Breathe in slowly. Breathe out a little slower. 3 times, 5, 10. The number doesn't matter. When the upper water clears, tomorrow's tasks, and what you may put down, will appear on their own. Watch the bowl. The silt will sink. The water will clear. Your shoulders will grow light. Your brow will unknit. And sleep will come quietly. For tonight, that is enough. World-honored one. This child is hasty. He often becomes angry and speaks roughly. How can he be corrected? The Buddha looked at Rahula and asked gently, do you like sounds? Rahula hesitated, then answered, "Some I like, and some I don't." The Buddha smiled and suggested they go together to a small mountain temple nearby. In the temple courtyard stood an old bell. The Buddha stroked it softly and said to Rahula, "Would you strike this bell?" Rahula lifted the wooden mallet and struck the bell with all his strength. Thump! A great, heavy sound rang out, its rough reverberation rolling through the hills. The Buddha asked, "How does that sound feel to you?" "It's too loud. A little scary." This time the Buddha struck the bell himself. With less force, a gentle tap. A clear, lingering tone spread softly through the air. Rahula's eyes grew round. "I like that much more. It makes me feel calm." The Buddha said, "It is the same bell and the same mallet. But if the mind that strikes is rough, the sound is rough and startles people. When the mind is quiet, the sound is quiet and brings ease to those who hear it." Rahula, your words are like this bell. Once they leave your mouth, you cannot pull them back. Harsh words fall on the heart with a thud, while gentle words remain warm, like a clear bell that keeps ringing. Rahula murmured, eyes on his toes. "When I get angry, I just explode. If I don't say it, I feel like I'll burst." The Buddha nodded quietly. "Then I will give you a small promise. Whenever anger rises, before you speak, imagine striking a bell in your heart. Ask yourself, do I want to strike it roughly, or let it ring clear? If you still must speak, take one breath. Look into the other person's eyes and speak gently. One who does this governs his own heart." Why is life so heavy? If only I could put it down. The Buddha came near and sat beside him. At first the merchant did not notice. He stared only at the ground. After a quiet moment, the Buddha said, "Would you set your burden down for a while?" Startled to see who spoke, the man answered, "If I put it down, I'll just have to lift it again. The road is still long." The Buddha smiled gently. "Yes, you will carry it again. But if you never rest, you will collapse on the way. Then neither your load nor you will reach the destination." The merchant hesitated, then untied the strap and let the sack fall to the earth. As his shoulders lightened, his breath deepened. "How can it feel this light?" He laughed softly. The Buddha asked, "When you set it down just now, did you abandon the journey?" "No, I only paused." "The worries of the heart are the same," said the Buddha. "All day long we clutch them. I must not let go. If I stop, I will fall behind. So the weight presses us down. But to put something down for a time is not to abandon life. While you rest, the breath returns, the mind grows clear, and strength comes back. Then you can see more truly which burdens to lift again, and which to leave." The merchant bowed his head and listened. "But I am afraid," he said quietly. "If I stop, others will pass me by." "Even a running horse," said the Buddha, "must pause to breathe, or it will fall. A heart that never rests will one day drop you in the dust. Friend, for at least one moment each day, set your burden down. Breathe in slowly, and breathe out slowly. Do not be ashamed of that time. It is not laziness. It is wisdom for a longer road." After a short rest, the merchant took up his sack again. Its weight was the same, but his face had changed. "I do not need to carry this forever," he thought. "There are things I can choose." He walked on with lighter steps,